Hey, I'm Dean and this is Legacy Voyage. In Season 1, I'm documenting my journey to earning my first 100K net worth as a full-time college student. Join me as I share some of the lessons I learned along the way. It is extremely windy right now, so hopefully this audio is actually coming through. If not, then I guess you're listening to this, so it should be working. This week, we've got the Olympics going on. And so with the Olympics, I usually don't watch it at all, but I've been watching at least parts of it this week. And something that they do that I think is actually really cool is they have these stories that they tell with some of the events and some of the competitions. Like, for example, there was this one specifically that really hit home for me. It was, I think, like the 100-meter swim or something with this dude named is Caeleb Dressel. And right before, they show this mini documentary about him and his story. And I think what's really cool about these is that they try to paint them as the heroes that we're rooting for as the audience. And because it's in America, of course, they want the American athlete to win the competition. And so they'll show these stories in a way that I find super powerful, but this one specifically really hit home. So basically, this dude name is Caeleb, and last Olympics, I think it was in 2020 in Tokyo, when he competed then, this man killed it. Like, he absolutely dominated. I think he got like 5 gold medals. And then on top of that, 2 of those gold medals were Olympic records. And on top of that, 2 of them were world records. So this man's literally broke like 4 records and got 5 gold medals. And so, of course, as you'd expect, and on the outside, he definitely was. He was like on top of the world, celebrating, fists in the air. But on the inside, or at least his wife noticed that she saw this smoke screen that he was putting up. And it talked about in this mini documentary right before he was about to come into this 2024 Olympics in Paris. After winning those 5 gold medals, he quit swimming for 9 months. And the reason why is because his relationship, his mental health, the water specifically that he was swimming in, it was unhealthy. Because of course he's super happy and super excited that he was able to win all these 5 gold medals. The thing there is that he thought he could do better. And it was this other side of him, this other voice in his head that he calls the critic. And it's something that I actually find, when I first heard about this, I actually found it extremely respectable. And Alex Hormozi talks about something similar where his goal is for himself to put all his effort into it. Even if he loses, even if he wins, just knowing that he put his all into whatever he was doing, that's all he needs. And even in cases where you win by a bunch, holding yourself accountable to say like, okay, I could have done better. Or even in cases where you lose, but you know full well that that's all you could do, and still being proud of yourself because you put all the effort in. And so in that sense, I find this story of Caeleb, I find it super respectable that this critic in his head was able to push him to new limits. Because I think his wife mentioned this, not many people know what it takes to be a world-class champion, to be an Olympic gold medal champion. And me included, like, I have no idea what it would take to do something like that. But where I think this gets a little hazy is especially where, in Caeleb's case, he takes this critic in his head and dials that voice in his head up like 100-fold, to the point where it eventually comes to where he's shaming himself. He's literally won all these gold medals and he's still shaming himself for what he did. And I think this comes back to something that I keep talking about over and over and over again, but it's this idea of balance. Trying to balance on one side being this critic where we can hold ourselves accountable and push ourselves forward, knowing that we could have done more, but at the same time, trying to balance that with being forgiving to ourselves. Well, loving and accepting and caring, and trying to balance that, I find, is probably one of the tougher things really in life. And so in this scenario, it seems like Caeleb pushed his inner voice, his inner critic, to the extreme, to the point where it got to this point of shaming, where he literally had to quit swimming because of his mental health and his relationship with the water. And for some reason, that really just hit home for me. Because like, I don't know why. Maybe it's the fact that it's talking about like this balancing this inner critic, this other side of his identity, or maybe it was just the fact that it was involved with the Olympics or something. But I just found it really fascinating, and it hit home really hard for me. A couple other things that I'm noticing as I'm watching the Olympics. I already mentioned the first thing, like talking about these stories and especially Caeleb Dressel's story. But the second thing I found is that we don't get a behind the scenes look at what these athletes actually put in to the work that they do. Like even Caeleb's story, they gave us like a hint of what he went through, but we don't actually know what he went through 5 a.m. workouts, watching his diet every day, all of that work that goes into his couple minutes where he's going to actually be competing. And so in some cases, people want to be like, oh, man, it would be so cool to have a gold medal from the Olympics, but not really understanding or not really realizing that with that gold medal comes the 5 a.m. workouts. With that gold medal comes all the effort, all the energy that needs to be spent on training for that couple minutes of competition. And there are so many cases where they could even put all that time in, come competition day, they don't perform to their best ability. That's the reason why I personally have a ton of respect for these Olympic athletes that are out there putting their all into all this stuff. Because I mean, bro, I think the farthest I went in athletics is probably like, I mean, probably right now doing like club rugby, but even with club rugby, it's not even that deep, bro. All we have is like these 2 practices a week. Maybe we have games on the weekends. Don't really take working out seriously. Don't really take cardio or any of those things seriously. But for these Olympic athletes, bro, they put it all out there. So I have a ton of respect for them. But the third thing I realized, especially watching the 100-meter dash, I feel like this is the big thing. And for some reason, there was so much hype around it. Like, this is where Usain Bolt got famous. This is where trophies are made, right here, the 100-meter dash. And so they were hyping up this event a bunch. And so race starts, and it literally only lasts like a couple seconds. It's literally over in like a blink of an eye, basically. But at the very end, it almost looks like everyone tied. Like, literally all of them look like they tied everything up and everyone was gonna get either a gold medal or nothing. But they had to break it down frame by frame at the very end of the race to see who actually won. And the results of that actually, like, oh my goodness, it sticks with me even to this day. Like, the difference between first place and having that gold medal and being completely off the podium at 5th place was 6/100ths of a second. Take time to think about that number. That is absolutely mind-blowing to me, where each of these athletes have been training basically their entire lives up to that moment for everything that we put on the line. And for the difference between a gold medal and off the podium to be 6/100ths of a second, that is mind-boggling to me. And this is something that Alex Hormozi also talks about, where he really hits on this difference between our input and our output, where if we put in that 10x input of those 5 a.m. workouts and watching the diets and all these different things that it takes to be this Olympic caliber athlete, the output is just so minuscule, but it's enough to make that 6/100ths of a second difference. And with that difference comes a gold medal versus being completely off the podium. Now, honestly, I don't know if I explained that well enough, but in my head, it makes a ton of sense, because there's this thing in economics, I think it's called something related to like law of diminishing returns. But basically, up to a certain point, you get diminishing returns on the effort that you put in. But I think what Alex Hormozi is hitting on right here is that even with those diminishing returns, you still get 100x output or reward on those returns if you work hard enough or something like that. I still gotta philosophize about this more. Now that I'm thinking about it out loud and talking through it in this podcast, I'll spend more time thinking on that. But finally, I remembered to give the update on my weekly intention. I think last week, my weekly intention was something related to, turning away from fleeting dopamine, which would be binge eating, and toward fulfilling dopamine, which is, in this case would be this audio journaling that I've been doing. And I'm super happy to report that it has been pretty successful. I don't think I've binged eaten in the last week, which is phenomenal, especially like considering my health and mental health and all those things. So that is super awesome. But now, moving on to the philosophizing section, I've been thinking a lot about the parallels between stand-up comedy and business or entrepreneurship, which I find fascinating because I feel like this applies to high levels of basically anything. High levels of sport, you can apply to high levels of business, or a high level of, I don't know, like psychology or history or something. You can apply that to high levels of business. And in this case, I was catching up with a fool who was doing stand-up, or at least he got involved with stand-up. So he was telling me some of his experiences with stand-up comedy. And I don't know, I just felt like it meshed and paralleled super, super well with everything I was learning in this business world. And just a couple of the things that I want to run through, where first off, when he started stand-up for the very first time, he absolutely killed it from what he was telling me. But then he did it a second time and he completely bombed and did terrible. But as he did it more and more, as he got more reps under his belt, he got better and better and better at the skill of doing stand-up comedy. And this really all comes back to something that I find pretty much across any domain is this idea of failing forward, which is kind of like the theme of this entire first season of how I'm even gonna end up making this 100K while I'm in college. But just failing forward is really the name of the game. Because with failure comes a bunch of lessons, comes those reps under the belt that we can just put into the next failure that will hopefully, maybe, might end in some type of success. But that was the first lesson. The other thing that he said was as he was writing jokes and he would think of things that he thought would be funny. Like he would write a joke that would be like, oh, this one's gonna hit. And you write another one, it's like, oh, maybe this one might hit, maybe it might not, but we'll try it out. But as he would try out different jokes with a live audience, he would really get to see which ones are a hit and which ones are not. And this would really hit home because there's something I've heard, or another lesson I heard from someone else would be that most of our assumptions as founders are wrong. Like, for example, I could have assumptions around, oh, Pacific Islander entrepreneurs are willing to pay to meet other Pacific Islander entrepreneurs. And that might be an assumption. But the only way to see if that is true is to go out to the market and test. And this is very, very similar, where with stand-up comedians, the only way for them to know if a joke is actually funny is for them to go into an audience, go out into the world and test it and see if they laugh or not. Another parallel I found is that as this guy who I was talking to, he would get all these different advice, a whole bunch of advice from a whole bunch of different people, from other comedians who thought they were super funny, from just random people who had advice to give around like what's funny and what's not. He said that he would get all of this advice from other people, and he realized this thing about stand-up comedy is that most people honestly don't know what they're talking about. But more than that, advice seems like this super, super easy thing that you could give. Like literally anyone in the world, even a baby, they could just give advice like it's like there's no tomorrow. And this is probably one of the reasons why I don't know, kind of hesitant with this whole consulting world. Because in some sense, consultants, what they do is they give advice. And you might say, okay, well, the good consultants, they'll give good advice. And the great consultants, they'll give great advice. But the hardest thing, I think, is actually implementing that advice, actually putting that advice to action. Because, I mean, I've seen this even in my life. I can read all the books in the world that tell me, oh, this is how you do this thing, or that's how you do that thing. And as soon as you check off this list, you'll have everything accomplished. But at the end of the day, I haven't even taken the first step forward. And so for him in stand-up comedy world, he saw everyone giving him all this advice when really all he needed to do was to step on stage and make that first step forward, cracking that first joke and seeing what the audience says and their reaction and their feedback and taking that to the next level so he could improve. And the final parallel that I want to hit on today is where he was talking about that first time he set foot on stage and did his first stand-up show or stand-up session, whatever it's called. Because I think especially in the startup world, and me included, bro, like a lot of us over fantasize and overhype this thing about launching, like, oh, it has to be the perfect colors and font and everything has to be perfect in order to launch. But some advice I heard about this talking about, bro, launch as soon as possible, as fast as possible, and don't make a big deal out of it. And in the stand-up comedy world, like, I feel like I would agree with that. Like, don't make a big deal. Don't invite your entire family and stuff and overhype your first stand-up show. Like, just go out and do it for the first time. It's not that deep. It's not that big of a deal. And honestly, the first time is always going to be the hardest. So as long as you get that one under the belt, then you could go and take it into the next thing. But I heard this advice, especially talking about this whole startup entrepreneurship world. It's like, bro, don't make a big deal out of launching. Just go and launch. So that way you get feedback even faster than the person who's in their basement trying to put together the perfect launch and nothing ever turns out. Now, completely away from like business and stand-up comedy, there's this weird question that I was kind of asking myself this one night as I was reading these scriptures, and I'm pivoting to religion now. But the question I had in my head that might honestly be like blaspheming in and of itself. The question is like, why didn't Jesus kill anyone? And this is actually a genuine question because I think it raises a whole bunch of other questions that stem from whatever the answer might be. Because in the Old Testament, we see the Old Testament God kill a bunch of people, like straight up. There are a whole bunch of examples. I mean, you look at Exodus, you look at the flood, you look at a whole bunch of different examples where the Old Testament God literally killed all these people. And so there's a couple of theological ways that people try to mend this answer, where I think in the Calvinist perspective, they might say something like Calvinist is like a branch of Christianity. they might say something like, oh yeah, the reason that it's morally okay for God the Father, for this Heavenly Father, God of the Old Testament, the reason it's okay for him to kill is because we're all sinners. And the price of sin is death. And so it's morally okay for him to kill whoever he wants because he has that authority. Whereas me as a person, I'm also a sinner. I don't have that authority. And so it's okay for him to do those things, but not for me. And if you take an approach like that, then I guess the follow-up question would be, would it be morally okay? Would it be morally acceptable if Jesus did kill someone? Because I think if you do take that Calvinist approach, I think you do have to say, oh, yes, like in some ways he does, it would be morally okay for him to kill. But like if you look at, I think the LDS theology, there's something about how Jesus is kind of like the Old Testament God, but I don't know. This is a random question I had that I think has a bunch of interesting implications, but I haven't thought about it too much. And honestly, bro, I might look back at this podcast and be like, oh my goodness, that's what I was thinking about. But this is honestly more of just a curiosity type question. Anyways, moving on to L's of the week. I think there's a couple L's this week. I mean, even yesterday, last night, I was, for some reason, having a super tough time sleeping, where I literally like was rolling around in my bed and I realized it's like 2 in the morning and I still couldn't fall asleep. So there's this advice around sleep that I've been hearing, and it's like, whenever you can't fall asleep, just get out of bed and stay out of bed until you're actually tired, and then you can go back in bed and then fall asleep. But the thing was, I was tired though. Like I literally got out of bed, sat on the couch and waited, but then I like almost falling asleep on the couch. So then I went back to my bed and eventually I was able to fall asleep, but I don't even know. That seemed like a weird L to take. I just wasn't able to fall asleep for some reason. Anyways, moving on to the weekly roundup. The roundup of a couple things that I find over the past week. And this first one was kind of interesting. So the first one is kind of taken from a story. So there's a story of a guy who, he's LDS, he's Mormon, and he's taking his son and they're going to a friend's birthday party. Now, there are a couple things. So he knows that this family that he's going to the party with, he knows that they are also members of this church that they're a part of. He knows that they're also LDS. But something that he doesn't know is that since then, they have left the church. And so now they're no longer Mormon. And so everyone around him, they all know that this family is a Mormon, but he doesn't. And so he goes to this party and the topic of the church comes up and they start talking about this. And there's this recurring theme that seems to come up with the people who are around him. And it's that the LDS church, this Mormon church, it seems to be like this high demand religion. And you could even do this with like Christianity or Islam or any of those quote unquote high demand religions. And I guess the realization would be like they are a high demand religion, comma, and that's okay. Because something he talked about was that, like, in some ways you would expect it to be a high demand religion, or you would expect for certain things to be off limits as you try to work toward some type of dream identity that has this greater good or something like that. Where if you are trying to be someone who's like Jesus, then it seems to make sense that you have these quote unquote demands that is required to be like him, like trying to forgive others or all the other things, like not being drunk and all those things. That goes into what it means to try to be like Jesus. And so in some ways, that was kind of a lesson or realization in some ways, because like you would expect this thing to be a high demand. And I guess this kind of fits into the other thing I found this week was this podcast. But it's probably My First Million, which is like a businessy type podcast. But in this specific one of the podcast hosts, his name is Sam Parr, he talks about 6 lessons he's learned since deciding not to drink alcohol anymore and completely cutting it from his life. And since then, I think it's been like 11 years since he's quit alcohol. And the story behind it is that he got to this point where he realized that it was basically an addiction. He turned to alcohol to suppress and run away from his emotions. And he found that as he turned to other things and he had this thrill and this rush of confronting problems and confronting his emotions head on, instead of running away from it using alcohol, he found healthier ways to deal with his emotions. And I don't know, like from the lessons he said, it really hit home for me as I've been trying to overcome this other type of addiction, which is this binge eating addiction. And I think it applies to really any type of addiction if anyone's trying to overcome anything. Like a lot of the same lessons that he talks about here. Like for example, just one that I can think of off the top of my head, that he talks about when quitting something like quitting an addiction, it requires this shift and this change in identity where we start seeing ourselves in this completely different light. And I was like, bro, that literally, it hits on this whole thing, which is this idea of a dream identity. But there are a lot of things he talks about that I think was really, really cool. What I mean, like a cool perk he found with quitting alcohol is that it kind of got the attention of people that he wanted. Like not only from guy friends who was like, oh, that's kind of cool. I want to be around you more. But also when he went on dates and he would tell people, oh yeah, I don't drink. Like it seemed to get the attention of these potential partners that he would be with. And I don't know, I just thought that was funny. One, because I think it's super true. Like if you're trying to attract, like if you have all these different things that you list out in a dream partner and you're trying to attract that type of person, it seems to make sense that you want to build yourself up to someone who's worthy of attracting that type of person. Now, hopefully that makes sense. But basically, the whole lesson that he was talking about was like, become the type of person who is worthy of attracting the type of person you want. There's probably a way easier way to simplify that and phrase that, but that's all I can think of off the top of my head. Anyways, moving on to the big updates, the life update. Let's see. Starting off, first things first, I think I mentioned this in the last episode, but I've kind of shifted my priorities to where now I'm putting my God as number one and trying to really prioritize that. And so now I've been keeping up with this habit of trying to pray, trying to read scriptures every single night. And for the most part, I can't think of a night where I've missed it. So I think for the most part, I've been sticking pretty on top of it. And it's also like a personal interest of mine, so it makes it easier because I actually enjoy studying and learning about this stuff. So that's a dub. Let's see. I guess the next update would be update on myself. I mean, like I mentioned, my own personal, physical, mental health, this is at an all-time high in the past month because, I mean, not even low-key, bro, high-key, last month, I was in a really, really tough place. I mean, staying up playing video games till like 4 in the morning, getting like 4 hours of sleep in, and binge eating every night with Domino's pizza and brownies. Like that was a really, really tough time. And what's even tougher is that I went through it basically alone. I do not recommend for anyone. Like this is probably the other thing. If you're going through stuff, go through it with other people. Because when you go through it with other people, it makes it, first of all, it's like, okay, you're not the only one. Second of all, you have this community of people that you can turn to as you're struggling with things because they're struggling through the exact same things. So you can work through those things together. And so that's probably what I would say if you're going through things alone. Because I mean, I can testify to this part too. Like it is rough going at it alone. So in my case, I guess I kind of turned to, well, one person I definitely turned to was my cousin. But even more than that is turning to kind of what I'm in right now, turning to God, turning to Jesus, which has honestly helped like immensely. And I guess another thing kind of going with my health is that I found this form of cardio that I really, really enjoy. Because here's one thing about me, like the only form of cardio I do currently is rugby. And the only reason I do rugby is because I love rugby. Like I actually genuinely enjoy playing rugby. So I do cardio and it's just like, cardio is just like a byproduct of the main thing, which is rugby. And literally just the other day, I went to like this salsa class and bro, it was honestly so much fun. And I'm just realizing this now, but dancing seems to be another one of those things where it's an amazing way to do something I already love. Like I already love dancing. Dancing is just super fun. But when you add to that like this form of cardio, and I'm doing cardio while I'm doing dancing, but I'm not really focusing on the cardio part. Like that just seems like a recipe for success or something like that, where it's basically good things will come out of me doing this salsa dancing thing. And I know there's like a Latin dancing club at Northwestern, so who knows? Maybe I'll join and do some Latin dance competition or whatever. That might be pretty sick. Anyways, update on my people. I mean, honestly, it's been going phenomenal. I feel like, well, because I don't want to get too like personal, especially on this podcast, because when I talk about my people, I'm not talking about like just me personally, but all I can say is that it's going well, basically. I think it's probably the most detail I can get into it. Moving on to my work. Let's see. My work has been probably the most interesting update. Now I gotta be like super transparent, super honest with you. Like the hardest thing about this whole entrepreneurship thing is figuring out what to work on. Because there are like 10 different things that you can work on at any given time. So you got to figure out like, what should you work on? How long should you work on it? How much effort should you put into that thing versus another thing? But basically this past day or two, I've been really focusing in specifically on getting this pitch deck together and the pitch deck for Demo Day Jumpstart. And I've been putting together this story, trying to craft it together. Honestly, I have like the bare bones of it, so it should go decently well, hopefully. But really, I'm leaning into my strength with this startup because, and I'll talk about this in the pitch itself, but at the end of the day, this isn't some venture backable business. This isn't like the next $1 billion idea. And honestly, like, I'm not even looking to raise money with We Are Asian. But the thing or the differentiator that I think is why it'll hopefully work, and I'll talk about this in the pitch as well, but for one thing, it's like a proven playbook. It's a very simple business. Like there's no fancy AI thing that you have to prove out or make sure of or like test any big assumptions. And basically it's like a laundromat and a car wash. People will always need their cars washed. People will always need to wash their clothes. And so this is just something that like small business owners will always need help with marketing, because they're always overwhelmed with all the other things they have to do with running a day-to-day business. The second reason why I think it might work is because I think me as a Nesian, I think I bring like a certain depth of understanding to this problem. Because it's not necessarily that these Nesian entrepreneurs, these Nesian business owners, it's not necessarily that they want marketing or they want a website or they want more customers for the sake of making more money or anything like that. The reason they want it is to spend time with their families and to provide for their families. Like that family aspect is easily the most important thing, especially when talking to any of these Nesian entrepreneurs. So that truly is what it's all about. And so that's the other thing, having this depth of understanding of the problem itself. But a third thing of why I think this will work, and probably the biggest differentiator, is this unique connection that we have as Nesians. Like literally when I hopped on a call with someone, he said, I've been burned before. And the reason that he trusted me as opposed to people who quote unquote he's been burned before by, or even the countless number of emails and messages he gets spammed left and right from all these different people promising these things. The reason he doesn't answer those and he picks up my phone call is because we are Nesian. I am Nesian. He is Nesian. We are Nesian. And so like that implicit or implied amount of trust, I think is probably the biggest differentiator of why I think this might be successful or this might actually work. So now all I need to do is hopefully tell it in a compelling way, but basically prove out these ideas. Like go out, get the first customer, make the first couple sales. And it's weird and annoying at the same time, because I mean, I've sent out a whole bunch of messages, whole bunch of outreach emails and everything, but man, it is tough to just get these people to hop on calls and sell them on this thing. But not only that, like fulfilling it, because like I can do pretty decently well at the actual sales portion of the thing, but fulfilling on these sales, like that is probably where my weakness is. And I've been looking at potential solutions like white labeling services and stuff like that, but I don't know. We'll see where things go. If nothing else, I'm learning a lot as I'm putting this whole thing together and failing forward, because that's really the name of the game. But I think that's it for the update. I'm still trying to think of what my weekly intention will be for this week. Maybe I'll make it something related to like, I don't know, maybe like tracking food or something, because that's probably something I want to work on more. Or maybe something more related to work. Let's see. How about this? My weekly intention for this week, it will be tracking my food and staying on top of that, because nutrition is pretty important when it comes to trying to stay on top of health and stuff. So I'll try doing that and see where things go. It also helps me to hold myself accountable. But yeah, I'll give the update in next week's episode. But till then, I shall see you there. I record these episodes completely free to share success with everyone. So the only thing I ask is that if you learned anything or found something interesting in this episode, just leave a review and share it with a friend. Only takes 5 seconds and it would mean the world. Thanks, and I'll see you in the next episode. Tatok, see you.